I'm Terrence Roberts. I am one of the kids who in 1957 participated in the desegregation of Central High School. We are known most publicly as the Little Rock Nine, a name we didn't give ourselves. A news person of some vintage coined that phrase, and we've stuck with it. In fact, we've adopted it. We have the Little Rock Nine Foundation, for instance, and that is part of our legacy. We hope to leave because when we're no longer on the scene, we want our work to continue, and that is making sure that every single young person in this country gets the kind of education he or she deserves. As a kid growing up here in Little Rock, I always knew that things were not the way they should be. Things seemed to be illegal, immoral, unnecessary. I didn't quite know how to respond to that as a very young person, so I began to ask questions. I buttonholed anybody I could, wanting to know as much as I could. One thing I found out right away was that many people were afraid to even discuss the issues. A fear covered their faces. And that alerted me to the fact that I should be careful how I raise these questions and when I raise them. But I persisted in looking for the information, even without the questions. I think early on I figured out that if I don't do something, nothing will be done. Not that I thought that I could fix the whole thing, but as a citizen of the country, even as a very young person, I thought it's my duty to try and fix this thing that seems so broken. And so that partly motivated me to join this group in the desegregation of the high school. That seemed to be something tangible I could get my teeth into. Didn't have a clue about how it was going to turn out, but was inspired to participate and did so. And in the process, I learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about others. After Central, after that 1 year, by the way, it was just 1 year because the schools were closed the following year, I continued to learn, continued to develop an understanding about what was truly going on. Because I saw the results of what happened here in Little Rock. We made an attempt to open the doors, but there was a lot of opposition pushing back on the other side. So that eventually led me into the study of psychology. And I became a clinical psychologist and practiced for a number of years in California until a recent retirement. And at this point, I now live in Georgia. But during all of those years, my main focus has been how can I help other people figure out how to confront these issues? Because a lot of it was tied to some of the issues I had faced at Central. Ergo, the whole matter of things racial. We don't do race very well in this country, with good reason. One reason being that there's no such thing as race. I mean, scientifically, biologically, it has never existed. However, it is a fact in the minds of most of us. And so I have been trying to get people to understand how to accept the reality of race, as fictional as it is, but then figure out how to navigate the terrain as defined by race and racism. And so far, I think it's been working well. I can't say that I've done miraculous things or marvelous things, but I think in few cases, some people have experienced lights coming on inside their own brains and figuring out that, hey, I really do need to question some of the stuff I've been forced to believe. You know, interestingly enough, I'm married to a historian, and I've been privileged to learn a lot about history that I didn't know just through conversations at home and being a research assistant as she pursues some of her own professional goals. I have a personal connection in that my dad was a member of the US Navy. He was conscripted. He didn't volunteer to go, but this was during a time period before World War II when a lot of men were being asked to go and fight for freedom and justice. And interestingly enough, as a Black person, he didn't fare well. He never really talked about it to me, the kid, but I assumed this was the case because most of the men I knew who had been veterans were reluctant to talk about what their experience had been like. But I do know from my own exploration, especially of the Navy, that the segregation that they experienced was extreme and that it was brutal. that they were not allowed to be full participants, but they were there as people who were the stewards, the cooks, the cleaners, the people who did the carrying of the heavy equipment, that kind of thing. And I do believe it actually led to my dad's early death, because he used alcohol as a way of subduing the demons in his own mind. And again, this is stuff we never really talked about, but I could see it in so many ways as we interacted. I attempted on occasion to talk to him about it, but it was fruitless. He was determined not to. And I think he just didn't want to disturb the demons any more than he had to. And I think that's true for a lot of men, especially black men who served in the armed forces. Many black servicemen came back from the Second World War with thoughts that since they had participated in this war to end depression, to end prejudice perhaps, and to end a lot of things that were unpleasant and unnecessary, but found out that no change had taken place. And that was hard for them to manage, very difficult for them to manage. I think it interfered not only with their own personal growth, but it interfered with their ability to be parents, husbands, uncles, cousins, to all of the people who were closest to them, and to their participation as citizens in general. The Double V campaign was launched, and it said that we will have a victory in Europe and we'll have a victory at home, because they are commensurate with the goals of each of the persons involved in those two distinct territories. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen, and they were stymied as to why. My wife has helped me understand a lot about this, because she's explored that history about the Holocaust in some detail. In fact, I'll tell you a bit of an anecdote. She was asked to teach a bunch of high school teachers about the Holocaust so they could then share it with their students. And they protested. They said, "We don't need to know it. We just need to teach it." And she came home very perplexed. How could that be? And I think that to me represented the mindset of a lot of people, not just teachers, but especially teachers. And when you think about it, the Holocaust was possible because those who were in charge of it, or who perpetrated it, actually sent emissaries or ambassadors, if you will, to this country. They explored the South, and they learned about the strategies for how one really accomplished large-scale separation, what kind of methods to use, what kind of propaganda to use to get the people to adjust to this. And they went back and developed in Germany a program that is horrendous to even think about. How can one even imagine that kind of a program? But it has its roots in this country. In the U.S., the Holocaust is amazingly done. I think Ken Burns did a magnificent job. He pointed out through the voices of those he filmed how important it is to recognize the very tragically flawed history that we share. And some of the speakers were saying that once we have this information, perhaps there will be a way to close those doors and build something quite new, something that we have to imagine before it happens. But that imagination will be stilted if we don't get rid of all the vestiges of some of the sentiments that we saw in that documentary. And I think that one of the speakers said that the stream is still there. There may be flare-ups here and there, and we will douse those, put out those flames, but the stream continues. And unless we have that awareness and that knowledge, we can't do it. Because if we deny it, it is impossible to act. We cannot go against our own sentiments. I am one who believes that it is imperative that each one of us, as American citizens, have in hand personal knowledge about the past, not what someone else has told us, but that we have read ourselves, that we have explored ourselves, and are able to make a decision. And that decision then would be important in how we vote, the things we do, how we speak to each other, the actions we take in any situation where other humans are involved. All of that can happen, I have no doubt. It can happen. Big question is, will it? That I don't have an answer for. I'm hopeful that the answer will be yes, we can. But there's always the but. I think today we are probably at a point where we have as many opportunities to gain the knowledge we need as ever before. That part is clear. We have instant learning. If I want an answer to any question, I can simply turn on Google. I'll get some sort of an answer. It may not be the most satisfying answer, but that's a start. We can use that. But saying that, it tells me that if people are willing to use that technology in an effort to build their fund of information, they can be ready to make the change we need at this moment. Now, it's very clear that we need the change. That, to me, I think everybody would agree on that. But there is a strain in this country, a strain of belief that has infected so many people. When you look at the political stage, national political stage, it's quite apparent that we seem to be almost evenly divided in the country. That's a big number. You know, an even division says that half of us believe one thing, half of us believe another. How do we then make that a whole? How do we get rid of the two halves and make it a whole? It could go either way, seemingly, but hopefully those who have access to the truth will stand firm and not give in to the forces who embrace lies, falsehoods, what's the thing, fake news. But if in fact we have to go down to the wire, there may be some conflagration at the end. I don't know. I look at other civilizations and I know that some have fallen as far back as the Babylonians, to the Greeks and the Romans. And currently, what we see now happening in Britain with the death of the Queen, there's some real talk about, is it necessary to continue the monarchy? Which in a sense is more symbolic than anything, but still it matters in terms of how we think about our future. Hopefully there'll be enough people who say, we want real change and we don't want compromise. And we'll see what happens. Here we are at Central High School, and this is the 65th year since the chaos of 1957. And it's interesting, we're talking about the same things we talked about in 1957. The list of issues keeps coming up. If you go back and look at the chronicles of what we did for the 30th, the 40th, the 50th, etc., it's always been the same issue over and over. The same questions come up. And even today, as I do these programs here in 2022, I could have taken my agenda from 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And that's tragic when you think about it, but still necessary. And I'm okay with that because it's real. It's not something that I have to turn my back on and say, I'll wait for you to get ready. But that's no strategy for change. We have to confront. We have to care enough to confront, if you will. And I say that because sometimes people see confronting as probably warlike behavior. You're forcing me to change. No, not forcing at all. We're saying, though, it is important for me to say, but what you're doing is leading to our destruction. We need you on board so that we can build something solid, so our children can survive. We, in this country, say that we want every child to have an opportunity to be educated. We make bold statements about that, and yet our actions belie that statement. We don't support education to the degree that I would like to see it. I would like to see every child from the very earliest age learn how to learn, develop a methodology of learning, develop a way of combing through the archives, developing a way to separate truth from fiction, and to come through that experience as an adult, as somebody who is firmly grounded in the truth. That I would love to see.